Greetings and welcome to the Biz Info Zone show. My name is V-Lynn Hawkins. I'm your host, and I'm so excited to bring to you today's show. Our guests are talking about something that is really a subject that is at the forefront of my mind, and I'm certain is at the forefront of several entrepreneurs' minds, and that is caregiving. You are in the zone, the Biz Info Zone, where we empower you to express your purpose, plan your next moves, and take your lives and your businesses into the realm of prosperity. And we do that from a social enterprise standpoint. Now, what can be of a greater opportunity to talk about as far as a social enterprise and social entrepreneurship is caregiving. What do you do when you're an entrepreneur and a caregiver? Oh my gosh, you're actually crossed into two worlds. Well, my guests today, Dr. Ina Gilmore and Coach David Sheldon, really take this subject by the tail and answer some tough questions, because you might be surprised to discover that not only are you a caregiver, but there are people that you know that are caregivers. And as entrepreneurs, I think that we have a unique set of situations and circumstances that befall us because we are entrepreneurs, especially those who are solopreneurs. And you know, while the issues surrounding caregiving and the issues of caregivers are pretty much the same, we find ourselves looking at things differently because we're segmented as entrepreneurs. And we'll talk a little bit about that, because during this discussion, we're going to explore ways that you might be defining caregiving differently than what this new information is going to provide us. And even if you're a caregiver now, you're likely at the same point in life where you're recognizing, first and foremost, the needs of yourself. So without further ado, we're going to talk about caregiving, who is a caregiver, what some of the issues are, the 4 fundamental problems, and you're going to see how even if you're not a caregiver, some of these things do still apply to you. So I want to take this time to welcome our guests, Dr. Ina Gilmore. Hi there. And David Sheldon. Say hello to the audience.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lynn. Hi, everybody.
Wonderful. Well, I'd love to have each of you just give our audience a little bit of background. Tell us who you are, you know, how you got on this journey, and why you're so passionate about the subject of caregiving. Ina, start with you.
Sure, I can start. I'm an infectious diseases and internal medicine physician, and actually have been a caregiver all my life. I never realized.
Uh-oh. We just lost Ina.
We did. Oh my gosh.
Well,
until she gets back, I guess we're gonna let you have
looks
it.
Looks like I'm on, huh, Lynn? Well, hi. I'm sure she'll be back in a minute. She's out in South Carolina. I don't know what kind of weather they're having out there today, but I know she has a reliable collection. I'm sure she'll be back in just a moment. In any event, I'll go ahead. Hi, everybody. My name is David Sheldon. I'm a certified professional coach specializing in health and wellness. And Lynn, you had asked, you know, what got us on this journey. I have always had a passion for health and wellness, especially after I lost mine. This is many years ago now, over 10 years ago. I had a heart attack, and I wasn't, you know, living the best kind of lifestyle. Let's just put it that way. And it was a real wake-up call. And at that same time, I had a big career change and became a coach and became the director of the health coach training program, and a variety of events kind of moved me in this area. And no doubt, like many caregivers, I had my own personal caregiving experience with my wife, who is now deceased. And those types of experiences, I think, really give me the passion and the desire to be able to help others and provide resources and support for other people who find themselves in a caregiving situation. Oh gosh, I saw Ida come back real quick, and now she's gone again.
She did. She will be right back. But in the meantime, do me a favor and talk a little bit about how you and Ina met and got on this journey to express this information out to the world together.
Sure. As a matter of fact, about a year and a half ago, I had told you a little bit about my background, Lynn. I'm also a speaker and a trainer and a consultant. I do a variety of things, and Ina had heard about me from a colleague of hers, and she'd contacted me, and she asked me to help her put together a telesummit. She wanted to bring together a variety of people from around the world to speak about Alzheimer's. So we put that telesummit together, and she and I hosted that telesummit, interviewed a variety of amazing people who are out making a huge difference in their worlds. And also, Ina, whose website is Caregiving with Purpose, had always wanted to put together a program for caregivers, for training, for help, for support, for creating a community. So she also asked me to help her put that program together, which we have done as well. So those are just a few of the things that Ina and I have done over the last year.
That's beautiful. I'm still trying to get Ina into the viewing audience to see. So I'm going to ask you another question and buy us some more time as we're getting to this, because I'm going to need Ina to jump back out and come back in one more time, and then we should be okay. But, as you're talking about caregiving and this journey of caregiving, having someone to care for you or you care for someone else, how have you seen, especially over, say, the last 5 years or so, how have you seen that impact the entrepreneurial world? Have a lot of the people that you've been seeing coming to the forefront of having these issues being entrepreneurs, or do they self-identify in that manner, or what are you seeing there? And maybe, since that's such a huge question, it looks like Ina is back, and she does look like she's part of the viewing group now. Let me hold that thought and go to Ina and have you to go ahead and complete your introduction and how you got so passionate about this subject of caregiving. It sounds like you really started out in a place, as far as the medical community, totally different than caregiving.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yes, I started out as a professional caregiver, and gradually, with time, started caring for more and more of my elders in the family. My parents, I started to really care for them in the mid-'80s and became a full-time caregiver in 2002. When I got into caregiving with purpose, when I realized that caregiving and giving a voice to the people that are caregivers who don't have their own voice was really what my passion was, to really help them get through a lot of the medical stuff and a lot of the other things that they deal with and don't know how to talk to doctors, don't know how to talk to nurses, don't know how to deal with the caregiving issues that come up.
That's amazing. And I asked David to kind of give us an idea of how you two came together, and he did share his perspective, but I'd love to hear how you see that happening. Tell us your perspective on how you and David came together as far as this work is concerned. What was your intention?
Well, we actually started out from a mutual friend introduced us. And my intention was to have an Alzheimer's telesummit, which I had worked on the year before, and it never came to fruition. And it was through that we developed a relationship, and I realized that I needed some help in developing a program for caregivers, which is something I wanted to do for a long time, and that's really how we got together.
That's amazing. I love when joint ventures come together, seeing the greater opportunity and what you both bring to the table in order to make something happen. I'm totally there with you on that one. So let me go back to my original question, which was huge. And that is, you know, how do, and I'll simplify it. You know, we're talking to a group of entrepreneurs here who basically are looking at, you know, how do I define whether or not I'm a caregiver? I'm not really taking care of anybody, or maybe I am, but how do entrepreneurs show up in the space that you are teaching and informing and empowering caregivers?
Well, a lot of entrepreneurs are like a lot of caregivers. They're doing things, but one of the challenges with caregiving is that most people don't think of themselves as a caregiver. That term is kind of foreign. People think of themselves as an adult child. They may think of themselves as a spouse, a parent, a grandparent, even an adult grandchild that's taking care of someone. And they often also don't think of themselves as doing anything special. They just think of themselves as being a good parent, a good grandparent, you know, a good spouse, or even a good family friend. That's one of the challenges that comes up is how do caregivers define themselves if they don't understand that they're a caregiver? And when I first thought of caregiving, I thought of caregivers as somebody that would do things like helping somebody bathe or change, get dressed, you know, maybe get in and out of bed, even get meals together. But really, as time has gone on, caregivers do other things. If you do anything that interrupts your life on a regular basis to take care of someone else, you are a caregiver. That can be things like making sure of transportation, maybe you're making sure somebody has a good meal, maybe you do grocery shopping or help with grocery shopping. You might actually take someone to do their grocery shopping. You may be checking on them. You may be paying bills for them. There's a whole host of things that you can do, including things like helping them with their finances, maybe just calling someone or checking up on them on a regular basis. That defines a caregiver. And if you wake up at night worrying about someone, that's also a sign that you're a caregiver. And you may even, with time, a lot of times what happens is that the caregiver starts spending more time with the care receiver or giving care, and it interferes with their regular life, whatever that is. And we often think also we have to think about non-traditional caregivers, because today, you know, we have more single parents, single adult children that are taking care of adult parents, elder parents, or more and more we're seeing the younger generation is actually adult or young adult grandchildren taking care of their elders.
Yes, that's key. I have seen that an awful lot. And even with that, you know, the grandparent who's lost a child and is now caring for their grandchildren, which is my story. When I think about, you know, how I first entered into this, I didn't even conceive of myself as being a caregiver. Yet in determining that, you know, I am really taking care of this family in a way that it interrupted my previous life, I fall into the definition of caregiver. And, you know, there are probably some of those types of grandparents who see themselves more readily or identify themselves more readily as caregivers. There are many who don't. The grandparents that rearrange their schedule in order to allow the parents to do other things. We lost Dinah again. It must be her connection with the weather happening up there. But I'm glad you're still here, David, because I'm going to be calling on you with respect to answering my next question, which is, you know, what's the significance of us identifying ourselves as caregivers? Is there really something to that, or what?
There really is, Lynn. And just to highlight what you were just talking about in terms of the number of people who are out there as caregivers these days, in 2013, excuse me, there were 15.5 million caregivers in the United States, and they provided 17.7 billion hours of unpaid care. So this is something that is really a growing issue in our country and around the world, for that matter. Now, one of the areas that we really focus on is Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and we are in fact, passionate advocates for this because while many people have heard about Alzheimer's and kind of have an idea about what it is, there's a lot of folks who really don't understand what it's all about. And to answer your question, when someone does not identify themselves as a caregiver, there's some really, there can be some sometimes horrible consequences for people because there's a significant isolation that occurs. When something happens, and for all the folks in the audience who have been through this experience, I'll know exactly what we're talking about. When all of a sudden you become a caregiver, you don't really know what to do, you don't know where to turn for help. And of course, you try to get information, you do the best that you can, but still there's this horrible isolation that occurs for people, and stress and depression are huge problems for people. But when you identify yourself as a caregiver and start looking for those kinds of resources for the help and support that caregivers need to be able to be part of a community of folks who are going through the same issues, and just to be able to talk to those people, or to be able to talk to someone who is an experienced professional and someone who can say, you know, here, go to this website. There's some great resources for this here, and there's a great support group that you can join here. And for more information, you can go here. Giving people information, giving people help, giving people support, and giving them hope, because that whole mindset then empowers people and gives them the foundation to be able to provide effective care.
Yeah,
That was kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but
no, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's some psychological repercussions as well as some tangible physical repercussions from denying the identification of caregiver, or denying yourself to actually fully be in that space, because you're separated, you don't have the kind of support from those who understand what you're going through and potentially have the solutions that could help you to ease things on your end. And I know that a lot of times, we look at, I think Ina mentioned the various places you could be as a caregiver, the spouse, the adult child, the adult grandchild. And I have recently just been totally outdone by the stories around the adult grandchildren who are caring for their grandparents up until, that grandparent, transitions to their next life. And some of the things that they adjust in their lives, some of the relationships that they actually put on hold. And, while it is done from a place of love, talk to us about some of the real issues, not just psychological, but some of the other real issues that especially the younger generation that puts themselves in this place may suffer.
Ina's back with us. Ina, why don't you answer that question?
Sure. Well, a couple of things that really jump out is the isolation that occurs with caregiving. That can certainly occur with anyone, but particularly I think with the younger folks that may feel as though they're alone more than others. There's a real loss a lot of times of having your social connection because you don't have time for other people, other activities, that particularly I think the younger adults are more likely to need that as they're exploring and getting their own social network built up. It may be less of an issue with older folks, only because we're more likely to have already established those connections a long time ago. And one of the things that can also occur is that I think you need to spend more time in those initial relationships. So the younger you are when you're doing that, the more time you need to spend in that relationship. And if you are not able to do that because you're doing caregiving, that really interrupts that. The other thing that a lot of caregivers face is caregiver stress. And if you don't recognize that you're a caregiver, you don't recognize that you have caregiver stress either. And you don't recognize that you're at risk for it. I think, again, that is more of an issue with people that are non-traditional caregivers, whether that's younger folks or someone that isn't normally thought of as being a caregiver but has taken on the caregiving responsibilities.
Wow. And we hear about stress in the workplace, and stress on the job, and stress with the kids, and stress here and stress there, but do we really think hard and long about the stress that's undergone when you're a caregiver? And I really appreciate you bringing that information up. That's amazing, because as someone who's in the space of social entrepreneurship, one of the things that we look at is how can, as an entrepreneur doing business, lend support to areas like caregiving. If we ever were caregivers, or expect that one day we could possibly become caregivers. What is it that we can do? Well, there are a number of things that social entrepreneurs can do. But I want you to address for me, and I'll go into those number of things like supporting Alzheimer's organizations, your local, your regional, national, organizations. But even more than that, what are some of the effects on business that caregiving can have?
Well, first of all, one of my favorite quotes is from First Lady Rosalind Carter, who has said there are only 4 kinds of people in the world. Those people that have been caregivers, those people who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And I think that really brings it home that an entrepreneur needs to think about maybe they're a caregiver or will need one, but also businesses need to consider, and that includes entrepreneurs, that maybe the people that they're hiring are going to be caregivers, and especially when we're looking at things like the internet, with the more flexible hours that can occur a lot of times, that really opens up the opportunities for caregivers to have a job. 3 of 5 caregivers are employed in the United States, and the effect on U.S. businesses is as much as $34 billion a year due to just caring for someone over the age of 50. That doesn't include all of these other folks, like adult children that may need a care, or a younger spouse or a younger person. And we're seeing with Alzheimer's that early onset Alzheimer's, which is defined as someone having the onset before the age of 50, is becoming more of an epidemic. And it's really, well, Alzheimer's and dementia itself is an epidemic. The numbers are skyrocketing that we're seeing with baby boomers and with generations after them. I think those are the major effects on business.
Wow. And, are there some things that we are doing to, and I'm speaking of Alzheimer's and dementia in particular. I know the statistics around our nation becoming a more obese society. Are they looking at, some of the contributing factors to Alzheimer's and dementia being, some of the consumption of food and, lack of exercise, which are 2 of the things that, are physically related that I know that caregivers actually find themselves in. I can't make a decent meal, so I'm going to do fast food. And, are they attributing some of these issues like obesity and lack of exercise to the onset of Alzheimer's and dementia at these early ages that you're talking about?
I'm not sure the studies have actually been done regarding that. There are some associations that have been found with Alzheimer's. For example, people that walk have a reduced risk of Alzheimer's. And there's some other activities, people that are, but one of the challenges is it somebody that's walking without Alzheimer's, does that mean that they have reduced their risk of Alzheimer's, or does it mean that they didn't have it in the first place and didn't go on to develop it? The same thing is true of people that do crossword puzzles and other mind games, even crafts like knitting. Those have been shown to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's. Again, the question is, which came first? Was somebody able to do it because they didn't have Alzheimer's or dementia, or is it that it prevents it? Personally, I'd go ahead and do it because, walking and eating healthy and doing crafts can have a lot of other benefits for you. And if it's going to help reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, let's do it. Eating healthy and so on. Getting a good night's sleep, that's another one. There's an interesting statistic that if someone gets 6 hours of sleep or less, the next day they're actually often or most likely will qualify as having decreased mental acuity consistent with extremely early Alzheimer's disease, which is really scary.
And if I know the entrepreneurial community, I know that there are I'm safe in saying the majority of entrepreneurs fall into that category of less than, what was that number, 7 hours sleep?
Six.
Yeah, or averaging 6 hours sleep.
Right.
And, so what you're telling me is that's dangerous territory.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And David, you coach people around these aspects, giving them opportunities or helping them to put their lives in order. This is one of the things that you talk about, how much sleep do you get? What other things do you kind of work with people to do?
Well, it's really the basics that we were just talking about. What you eat, how much movement you have, and I like to use that term, Lynn, because I don't use the E word very often with folks, exercise, because it has negative connotations for some folks. I noticed that fantastic machine in the background there in your office, so I see that's not an issue for you, but nevertheless, I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that doing all of the basics, food, exercise, managing stress, drinking plenty of water, getting good sleep, all of the basics that we hear about over and over again, the essential foundations of good health are preventive of a number of conditions and diseases. At the same time, I think it's important for our audience to know that, at the top of the hour, I was talking a little bit about some of the statistics about Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
For example, currently there's about 5 million Americans in the United States who have been diagnosed with the disease, and by the way, 2/3 of those are women.
Wow.
And also, the majority of caretakers, caregivers, are women also, at least 60%.
Wow.
But the statistics on Alzheimer's and the research on Alzheimer's is woefully lacking, Lynn, despite the fact that Alzheimer's there's 500,000 people who die every year in this country from Alzheimer's. And that's more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. But the public awareness and the money for research just simply isn't there. It's not, if you will, it's not a sexy condition. It happens to old people. It isn't talked about all that much. And frankly, it isn't understood that much either. But the net result of all that, Lynn, is that Alzheimer's disease is the only disease in the top 10 causes of death that cannot be prevented, cured, or even slowed down at this point in time, given our current level of knowledge.
Wow. Say that one more time. I want to make sure that that gets heard.
I sure will. Alzheimer's disease is the only disease in the top 10 causes of death that cannot be prevented, cured, or even slowed.
Wow. And I just tend to wonder if there are, people like, I don't know about you, but in my younger days, I was kind of, not too far gone, but I was kind of wild for a good kid. And, not really even thinking about what some of the consequences were of some of the things that I did. And, there's the old adage about people, especially in the entrepreneurial world, spend their lives to gain wealth. and then they end up spending their wealth to try to regain their health. And what you're saying is that for something like this, there's not enough money that you would be able to spend to regain your health, right?
That's right.
And
to put it bluntly, Lynn, when someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, they are essentially given a death sentence.
Wow. And
at least where we are right now with research and our current medical knowledge about the condition.
And so is the condition, you know, for those who don't know, is the condition considered to be more neuromuscular? Is it, you know, brain, you know, deterioration of the brain cells, or what is Alzheimer's?
I think we ought to have the doctor answer that question. What do you think?
It's a deterioration of the brain cells. There actually are plaques that form in the brain that disrupt the normal brain cells. And that's why someone with Alzheimer's disease, eventually, when they become symptomatic, they aren't able to recognize things and recognize situations and make judgments and all other kinds of higher thinking. It affects the brain, is what it does. The thinking, cognition, whatever you want to call it, all aspects of the brain are what are affected.
Memory.
Yep. Memory is one of the first things, but it also, I know before a lot of the PET scan was done, which is now done sometimes to help decide if someone has Alzheimer's, but years ago when I was first training, we would sit down and actually talk and examine the patient, was how we decided whether or not they had dementia and whether it was likely Alzheimer's. And one of the first things you would notice is that they could no longer do simple arithmetic. And this, as you can imagine, is devastating for someone that might be an accountant or even somebody that wants to balance their own checkbook. Suddenly they can't do it.
Wow. And I know that you know, in the entrepreneurial world, we're looking at people who are constantly, you know, on the move in the space of thinking, creating, you know, building and maneuvering through systems and processes, and, you know, looking at that as being in a space of, you know, mind agility, and, you know, my mental factors are here. Yet, if they're not taking care of themselves physically, it kind of doesn't matter what happens in the brain, because the brain is part of the physical connection. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it absolutely matters, and taking care of yourself, eating healthy, sleeping regularly, you know, getting your, as David wants to avoid the word exercise, but doing movement, getting up, moving around, all of those good things that we try and do. Don't smoke, you know, everything. Certainly it affects the brain. You can't function if you've ever pulled an all-nighter when you were studying. The next day, yeah, you can probably function for a few hours, but I can tell you, being a doctor, getting calls in the middle of the night, getting up and having to go to the hospital and not getting 6 hours of sleep is not the way to run your life long term, because you do find yourself not being as alert as you should, really having to concentrate on things. Everything becomes harder when you haven't been sleeping, when you haven't been taking care of yourself. And that's even true if you've noticed, if anybody has gained weight, things are harder to do. You have to move more weight in order to do the same thing. I mean, and if somebody is gaining weight somewhere where the skin rubs against each other, I mean, that can be very uncomfortable, particularly in hot climates like Georgia and South Carolina in the summertime, even if you're in air conditioning.
Yeah.
And all of those things, you know, you're more uncomfortable, it's harder to do things, and that definitely has a connection with the brain. If you're not functioning, and that's one of the problems with caregivers, if you're not functioning at top care and you're not taking care of yourself, how can you take care of anybody else? One of the big questions that asks, I mean, if somebody, if a caregiver suddenly has a heart attack or a stroke, what happens to the person that they're giving care to if they're suddenly in the hospital? Is there a backup plan? And maybe oftentimes there isn't. There's one caregiver that's trying to give care 24/7, which is impossible long term for good health.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like you've opened up the door for, the terrible things that you don't want to think about to actually come in. You're inviting them in. So I hear what you're saying to the caregiver, especially, and if you're an employee in a high-performing job, if you're, an executive in business, if you are anyone who's expected to perform at peak levels, and a caregiver, you've got to consider yourself first and care for yourself. I often use this analogy of, like you hear on the airplanes, put your oxygen mask on first, and then you can help someone else. Well, the same thing applies. You've got to take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of someone else, because I would imagine the number of stories you mentioned, somebody having a heart attack and going to the hospital. Well, what about you're trying to help the person that you're caring for and you slip and fall?
Exactly. Yep. Or you don't even have to fall. What if you twist your back? If you don't know how to lift somebody or you don't know how to take care of them? These are all things that need to be considered, and this is one of the reasons people have to recognize that they're being a caregiver. Because would you recognize that you're at risk for this injury if you didn't think of yourself as a caregiver? Even somebody that, very simply, let's say you're helping somebody get on their shoes and socks, which can be very difficult for somebody who's not flexible anymore. Well, what are you going to have to do with an adult? They're probably sitting on a bed or a chair, and you're going to have to get down on the floor. And if you can't get up and down on the floor comfortably, then you're going to have problems, because you could be stuck on the floor and have to call for help to get up.
Yeah. And because our generation, I'm 60 years old, our generation is living so much longer these days, it doesn't mean that it necessarily is in good health. And so, are there any suggestions, any other fundamentals that people really should consider as we are becoming more of an aged community? Help us in the realm of delivering some of this wisdom so that we can live healthier, longer lives.
Well, sure, and one of the issues to think about, I think, even before we start there, is that not only are people living longer, but the caregiving is longer than it used to be. If somebody has a long illness, like whether it's Alzheimer's or heart disease or something else that's causing them to need care, that could be 10 years or more that somebody's going to need care. And so that's something else to consider. But sure, start thinking about things like, if we think about stress, two of the things that I think that really help people are to think about gratitude as a stress reliever. That's very simple. You can just think about being happy about something, and most everybody has at least one thing they can be happy about and they can give gratitude for. It may be that the sun is shining today, or maybe it's that you're connected to the internet, or maybe that we're watching this wonderful show with Lynn Hawkins on the internet. We're grateful for the BIZ zone. It could be anything like that. And once you start with one, then you can make a second gratitude, and that can become one of the fastest ways to reduce stress, is to recognize, and you're shifting your mindset in thinking of it as something to be positive about, something that you're grateful for. And along with that, the same thing is acceptance. Accepting what's going on. Now, I'm not saying becoming a victim, and meekly accepting things. I'm saying things like accepting that you're a caregiver accepting the responsibility for being a caregiver and step into those shoes of the caregiver. And again, there's one, if there's one thing a day you can say, start there. Hey, I am a caregiver. I'm going to accept that. And most people can find one thing, and once you start, you can find other things.
Well, I want to take a moment to acknowledge our audience. I've got a pretty active audience out there today, and I want to acknowledge that Julie Wolf is here, and she's actually helping to welcome people into the audience. Thank you, Julie. We've got Andrew Tate, and we've got Ken Wolf, and Andrew actually has a comment here that I think is really kind of key to hear, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he says that he supports caregiving, and his interest is to assist the industry in a couple of ways. First, we're looking to unite caregivers within the industry and then ultimately deliver cutting-edge organic medicines such as cannabinoids, and today there's organic or natural treatments that go far beyond the invasive and the pharmaceutical treatments. Speak to us a little bit about what your take is on the natural, the organic, versus a lot of the medical procedures that someone may think might be the solution.
Well, actually, it goes back to eating healthy and having a healthy lifestyle, and I think organic is one of the things that goes along with that. If you think about it, if you're not eating organic, or at least some things aren't organic, you're putting pesticides potentially into your food, and then that's a toxin, and many of them are neurotoxins. And I think the same thing is true for a lot of the chemicals. I mean, I don't use any artificial sweeteners, and some of them are neurotoxins. That is, they are toxic to the neurosystem. So one of them is even used sometimes to kill ants. It doesn't always work, but that's one of them is used for that. And a lot of things, it has to be individualized, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Also, is that there are things that do work in the medical community. There are things that work that are in the alternative medical community, and certainly, a lot of it is the decision of the family and the decision of the person involved. I'm not a big fan of a lot of surgeries, and I think sometimes the medications that are used, one is piled on top of another. When I was in active practice, that was one of the big things I did, was to try and get patients off so many medications, and the numbers have only increased since then. And I've seen some terrible statistics about the number 1, number 2 medicines that are prescribed are pain relievers, potentially addicting pain relievers. And that's not something that, I don't think that's something that we should encourage if there are other ways to do it, and certainly natural care, alternative medicine. I mean, if somebody can get pain relief from acupuncture, go for it. I mean, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's so much better than taking a toxin. And the same thing is true, for foods. If you can manage your health problems by losing weight, if you have a little bit of, again with a doctor's, I would do it with a doctor's prescription or a doctor's care. If some diabetics can be managed with just diet. I would give up Twinkies. I have anyway. But if that's what it takes to stay off the diabetic medications, and I know the complications of diabetes. First, I mean, really, from seeing a lot of them in patients, that avoid it. Definitely.
Oh, that's amazing.
Lynn, could I go back to one thing that we talked about for just a moment? I know we're running a little short on time here, but I'd just like to re-emphasize for our audience, we've talked a little bit about stress, but it is, in fact, one of the, if not the, leading cause of numerous diseases and conditions, and it all goes back to the mind-body connection. Now, there's a variety of opinions about that, but there's more and more, there are just numerous studies that show that your mind, when you are thinking thoughts, if you are worried about the future, if you're dealing with something and you don't know what to do, all of that mental turmoil is felt by the body. That is transmitted to the body in a variety of ways. And there are more and more studies showing that many of the conditions and diseases that we're experiencing these days find their cause in that stress. Because your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between something that is happening in quote-unquote real life and something that's happening in your imagination. Your body still responds in the same way. If that means that you get tension in your gut or you get headaches, people respond to stress in a variety of ways. But it's all about thinking. And that's one of the reasons why we focus so much on that in the work that we do, is helping people understand what stress really is and to be able to transform that energy, not manage it, because there really is no way to manage stress, but you can take that energy and transform it with some simple techniques. And that truly is one of the foundations that I would really encourage people to look for in whatever it is that they're doing, because that becomes the basis of good health. And no matter, all this other stuff that we've talked about, eating right, all those other things, those are very important, but that's not going to make a bit of difference if you are constantly worried about future events over which you have no control.
I totally agree. And that takes me to the point of, Ina, you began something called Caregiving with Purpose. Tell us a little bit about that, what it is, who's it available to, how it helps, because one of the things that you both mentioned was the impact of isolation on the caregiver. So tell us a little bit about Caregiving with Purpose.
Well, Caregiving with Purpose is a website. You can find it at caregivingwithpurpose.com. It's free, available to everybody. It's specifically designed for caregivers, and I wanted to, when developing it, I wanted to try and bring some of the information that isn't readily available in one site to the caregivers, no matter what part of the journey they're on. And caregiving really is a journey. You start out as a beginner, and then you get a little bit more confident, and eventually the caregiving is going to end. If you're dealing with, you may very well be dealing with end-of-life issues, and you may very well be dealing with, what do you do after the caregiving ends if you've devoted so much of your time to it and your energies? All of these things I wanted to include in that, and because Alzheimer's has touched my life, but it's also touched a lot of caregivers, I started a section on dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, Alzheimer's is the #1 cause of dementia, but it's not the only cause of dementia. And also in there's a section for activities of caregiving, because I think that's something that people miss. One of the things that, when I was caring for my mom, she was a quilter and a crocheter for many years and a seamstress. She actually took clothing in college. That was her major. They don't do that anymore in many colleges, but that's what she did. Those crafts, we found that when she could no longer do them, but she could be the supervisor. She could watch us do them, that is my sister and I. That was really amazing to see how she would perk up and she would be interested in life again. And we were able to go through the various stages of that, either working with her with crafts and then having her watch us and then, just enjoying the craft afterwards. And that's why I've included that, but there are other activities also that we mention in Caregiving with Purpose. There's a membership site for folks, and we're also developing programs for education, information, and coaching.
Oh, looks like Lynn went away.
I'm here. I love it, and I know that with the membership, you'd made an offer to invite our audience to come play with you and find out more information about Caregiving with Purpose through being a part of the membership. Tell us a little bit about the membership, and there is going to be a page at skyhawkenterprises.biz/caregiving, where you can find all of this information and get to Ina's wonderful information. So Ina, tell us a little bit more about what they'll find as part of the membership.
Well, as part of the membership, they'll have access to a call a week, an hour-long call a week with Coach Dave and me on caregiving issues, and they also have access to previous calls that we've done. They also have access to some of the information that isn't available on the website to the general public, but is specifically designed to help caregivers, some of the tools that they can use, and some of the some resources that I don't have published for everybody but are available to them.
That's beautiful. And as a gift to our audience, Ina is giving that membership as an almost free 30-day trial membership. It costs 1 penny to get this membership free for 30 days. Try it out, test it out. If it does in fact fit with meeting your needs, sign up and keep going, because caregiving is something that I love what you said, that Rosalind Carter said. Why don't you tell us that one more time about what Rosalind Carter said? There's 4 types of people. There what?
4 types of people in the world. Only 4 types of people in the world.
Wow.
Those that have been caregivers, those that are caregivers, those that will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, with that said, you've also been such a generous heart to bring to our audience an invitation to your upcoming program. It's the Fundamentals of Caregiving, is that correct?
Fundamentals and Foundations for Caregivers.
And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, this is a 9-week program, and we're offering the online program to folks today. It's 1 hour. The online program is 1 hour of lesson a week. We also have a handout for them. It gives additional resources, and it goes through what we consider the foundations and fundamentals of caregiving, things like talking about activities and how they can help you build bridges between the caregiver and the caregiving receiver. Like I just talked about a few minutes ago, we're going to talk about transforming stress and really understanding it, how to balance life in caregiving. We talk about some of the foundations of empowerment, the mind-body connection, as Dave mentioned, and the stages of change, how to master those. All of these things are important for caregivers, but you can also see that they would benefit an entrepreneur who's not a current caregiver. Also, we talk about how you can create your own health and wellness. We also discuss, 1 week is on transforming grief and turning that into a celebration of life. We also talk about the power of purpose and meaning, and as we discussed earlier, finding my purpose in giving caregivers has really changed my life. And we also talk about how the steps to transforming caregiving from burden to blessing.
Oh, beautiful. And I just want to recap that. You know, one of the things that we miss out on is the opportunities to really get into the foundational material that helps us to not just support ourselves, but support others. So if you are a caregiver, want to learn more about the fundamentals and foundations in Ina and David's upcoming course, you'll want to make sure that you go to skyhawkenterprises.biz, B-I-Z, and /caregiving. And you'll also see the link to the page that will take you to the 9-week program. For normally $147, they're offering the early bird special to us for $97. And you can get involved. 9 weeks of learning what it takes for you to be a successful caregiver and what it can take out of you if you don't know this information. So, and then you're saying, you know, maybe this isn't right for me, maybe not right now. Share the information and help others who you know or don't know, maybe in this situation and maybe in need of this information. So I want to say, if there was one thing that either of you can bring to this audience to say, you know, wrap things up, you know, your huge golden nugget piece of information, what might that be? David, do you want to go first, and then we'll let Ina wrap things up?
Sure. This, for us, for me, Lynn, this ultimately is all about happiness. And meaning happiness in your role as a caregiver, happiness in being able to, wherever, as we say, your care receiver, whatever conditions or circumstances that person is in, to be able to find joy and satisfaction in the moment with that person, and to be able to celebrate that person, perhaps as they once were, as they are now, but to be able to stay rooted in the present moment, to be able to fully empower yourself in the now. That's what this is really all about.
That's beautiful. I love that. Full empowerment. It truly is about living a full life and a happy life, a joy-filled life. And Ina, give us your huge golden nugget.
Well, it's also empowerment. I tend to think of it more as empowerment in moving from the victim mentality, which a lot of caregivers have because they've become the caregiver because there's nobody else to do it. It may not have been their first choice, into recognizing that they have an important role, that nobody else is doing it, and nobody else can do it the way they do it. And to really step in and take charge, and to really understand that that is their empowerment, and that very well may be their purpose for this part of their life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to tell you that this has been an amazing session for me. I don't know if you know that I ended up stepping into my caregiving role because my son was killed suddenly, and my oldest grandson, he had sole custody of my oldest grandson. And so as I was arranging for my son's body to be returned from Japan, where he had lived 10 years and where my grandson grew up all of his life, I went through all of that, you know, the whole grief and the loss of a child, as well as now I'm in the role of caregiving and thinking, God, I raised 2 kids. I thought I was moving out of this. Yet I found myself back in it, and some of the struggles and the resistance that I had and had to move through was amazing for me to see. I always considered myself as being someone with a big heart. You know, my grandson, this is amazing. I'm going to be doing this. And I mean, some childhood triggers, you know, all kinds of things came up for me that I know that in the role of caregiver, others experience. And so I'm talking to our audience right now, and I just want you to know that if you are in this space, if you have had the opportunity to have moved out of this space, yet you've got some residual effects from it, or it's like Ina said, Rosalind Carter, there's only 4 kinds of people in the world. And, there is every benefit to preparing yourself, if you're not there yet, and preparing yourself for any one of these places, not to mention the fact that you can be an encourager to others who find themselves in this situation. So I highly recommend, if nothing else, be a part of the community. Know that you've got a connection. When the question comes up, you've got an answer. Caregiving with purpose. After that, determine the benefit for you to get further entrenched in the organization and the amazing things that Dr. Ina and David are doing. As a matter of fact, when you get to the website, you'll be able to see that Ina has won she's been placed in the top 10 awards of the best Alzheimer's blogger for the past 6 years or something amazing. I know that the results are incredible, and you can see those credentials on the website. I want to thank you, Ina, thank you, David, for joining me today to have this tremendously impactful and important discussion. I appreciate you, and I send you love and gratitude to both of you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you for all of the great work that you do at the P3 Academy and Skyhawk Enterprises. You also are a very amazing person, having a tremendous impact on the world, Lynn, so thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to be a part of what you're doing.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Both of you, I wish you tremendous success in the work that you're doing, and we're going to stay connected, because this is a message that I now have a voice in, and I know that that is part of what we are all responsible for, finding our spaces and contributing in that way. And so thank you. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today for another amazing episode of the Biz Info Zone show. My name is V. Lynn Hawkins. I'm founder of the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship and the founder of Skyhawk Enterprises. And I want to say to you, be the best that you can be. Open your heart. And in opening your heart, you will open hearts. The world of caregiving is expanding around us. Play a bigger part. Do your part. Join us in Caregiving with Purpose. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next week when we have an amazing guest, Bob Berg, the author of The Go-Givers Sell More, and in his latest book, Influence or Affecting Influence or something like that. We're going to have a great conversation. So join us next week. Thanks, guys, and I hope you can join us too, Ina and David.
Thank you, Len. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.